We often get told that mentorship is something which is extremely important to find, and that if you don't find one, then you're missing out. But what should you do if you can't find a mentor? Most of us these days are looking up to people who are either writing books or speaking on social media. And this made me think something different about mentorship. Two things which I'm going to share with you in this video. Hi and welcome to the channel. My name's Zach Hassan. I'm a junior doctor from Edinburgh. And this channel's all about trying to learn the skills to be able to write, speak and think more effectively. So I'm going to break this down into a couple of questions. 1. Why do we think we need mentors? 2. How Robert Greene explains how books can act in place of mentors. Thirdly, I'm going to introduce the concept of synoptic thinking and how this dramatically expands the mentorship that we can get from our books. And fourthly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I apply synoptic thinking in my life and the advantages that it's brought me. So, 1. Why do we think we need mentors? Robert Greene, in his book Mastery, makes a really powerful argument for the importance of finding a mentor. And it's mainly based on efficiency. He says, without any guidance, you can waste valuable years trying to gain knowledge and practice from various sources. The mentor-protege relationship is the most efficient and productive form of learning. This gives us the rather stressful message that doing well in life is all about trying to find the right person to teach us, someone who will take you on as an apprentice. This idea makes some sort of sense. Sports stars learn from their coaches who are often ex-players themselves. Musicians learn from a whole variety of influences, and it's the same with academics, debaters, politicians, and more. But if you're anything like me, you might not have that ideal person in your life, and you might be looking for some practical steps as to what you should do about it. 2. How books can act in place of mentors. Well, what do you do if you don't have somebody who's like that? Robert Greene explains that also. He says that there's a reversal to this idea of mentorship, and he gives the example of Thomas Edison to show what he means. We know Thomas Edison as the person who invented the light bulb, and also somebody who went to great lengths to try and stop Nikola Tesla from proving that alternating current was something that was safe. But the other thing about Thomas Edison that we don't realise is that he didn't have a formal education. A lot of his knowledge was self-taught. So while Robert Greene says mentorship is important, in the case of Thomas Edison, he says that sometimes you have no choice but to go it alone. Edison had to find his mentorship by reading books written by Michael Faraday and replicating his experiments. Over 10 years, this gave him the knowledge that he needed to be able to go on and create some of his greatest inventions. Now, I think this is a good strategy, but it makes you vulnerable to selective reading and being indoctrinated by following certain authors. But we can overcome these disadvantages by introducing another concept, which is what I call synoptic thinking, which is borrowed from this next book that I'm going to tell you about. Now, this idea of thinking synoptically comes from Mortimer Adler's book, How to Read a Book, where he was trying to discuss how someone could come to a truly informed opinion. Synoptical reading, as he called it, was the process by which you collate different insights from different authors about the same subject in order to generate additional knowledge which wasn't present in any of the books. Synoptical reading is therefore vital if you want to be able to come up with new insights and fresh perspectives rather than just following one person or another. This video in itself is a kind of synoptical thinking because I've taken two ideas from different books, and because I think that they're speaking about the same subject, mentorship, being able to bring them together in order to say something new. That's a lot more interesting than if I'd simply regurgitated both of these ideas. So, how do you do synoptical reading? Mortimer Adler tells us that there's a few different steps that we've got to follow. Firstly, you have to get really clear in your mind what the questions are that you're asking. Define issues within those questions so that you know how to frame the discussion that you're going to have with these different authors. Step 2 is to find and collate material about the same subject, bearing in mind that some of the authors may be using different words for the same thing. When you've identified the passages where each of these authors are speaking about these ideas, by bringing them together, you can get the authors to start answering your questions for you. This is what Mortimer Adler calls bringing them to terms. If you've done all that, and now you have your different passages, your questions framed, you're now ready to start analysing the discussion. You can start to see patterns in how different authors are talking about the same thing, about whether they're exaggerating certain perspectives or downplaying others. This all helps you to have a truly informed perspective by the end. So, wait a moment. You might be thinking, what has this all got to do with mentorship? Well, if we go back to Thomas Edison, who was using books as his mentors, clearly if we're using that strategy, we want to try and get as much out of these different books as we possibly can. Synoptic thinking helps us to do that. Is it just about reading? I would say no. Media is so much more diverse than just books these days, but this kind of thinking framework applies to video, to social media, to books, to online publishing. Basically, this applies to everything that you might hear or see or read, or even people who you meet. For example, I've been getting to meet lots of different types of mentor figure through the podcast which I've been running, which is called Healthy Discussions, talking about big ideas in healthcare with different sorts of guests. The beauty of this is that it's changed mentorship for me from just listening to a single person to now I'm able to listen to a whole variety of different people, and then by applying synoptic thinking, I'm able to generate meta insights about topics, for example like health inequality, which have never been said by any of my guests. I would say if you can have a side project where you get to meet lots of different people, you can apply these techniques too. 4. The benefits of synoptic thinking. Firstly, you're going to have a large social network of ideas and people that you can draw on if you're in a situation where the options are between thinking narrowly and getting stuck and needing a fresh perspective in order to overcome the problem. And secondly, exposing yourself to lots of different perspectives gives you a more accurate and informed view of the world around you and better able to navigate different situations which you might come across. Thirdly, and this is something I think that a lot of young professionals are really concerned about, is about how you find your niche or your authenticity. When you've listened to lots of different voices and gone through this process of trying to generate insights for yourself, that gives you something original which you can say. It's much easier to find your own voice when you found two different points of view which clashed, and you can say why you agree with one more than the other. So what I'd recommend is if you can get a side project where you get to meet lots of different people, or if you read lots of different books or listen to lots of different podcasts, use these ideas about mentorship and synoptic thinking. Use this to fulfill whatever your own mentorship needs are, and also to come to an informed opinion about topics you care about. If you like this video, then please subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel at this stage. And if you want to go a bit further, then you can give it a thumbs up and say what you thought in the comments. I'll see you in the next video. 2. What is it about filming? It's just so hard to speak.